lungs taste the air of time blown past fallen sand.
Greetings to you, warrior folk, and fellow travellers of the Golden Path. In this video I'm going to touch upon my experience on the HEMA Hobo Tour hosted by Diane Matthess, the Mercenary, and David Miller from Sellsword Arts of TikTok and YouTube fame. But first of all, I'd like to give you a little tour of where we went. Now, I'm no Lindy Beige, but I'm going to try and give you my best impression of him. So the HEMA Hobo Tour was held in the little town of Dunster in Somerset, England, on the edge of the Exmoor National Park. Now, it was chartered shortly after the Norman Conquest, and it was well known at the time for being something of a trading port called Dunster Haven. However, the ocean, being the fickle cow that she is, withdrew and retreated, leaving it stranded over a mile inland, so they had to turn to making wool fabrics. And you can still see one of the yarn market shelters in the centre of the high street today. It has many shops and coffee houses and tea rooms, but most importantly, it has some very nice pubs. Dunster is best known today for its castle, Dunster Castle, and its adjoining water mill, which is run by the National Trust. Now, it's been quite an old site. There was a castle on this site since the Norman period at the very least, and there's still a gatehouse from the 13th century present on the site. The main body of the castle was remodelled into something of a stately home in 1868 by the Luttrell family, and the family remained there for 600 years, if you can believe it, the same family living in the same property. And very nice it was too. I can't give you a proper tour of the inside because it is a National Trust property, and they would take umbrage with me displaying what you have to pay and go and see, but I'd very much recommend going and checking it out. Now, the structure stands vacant today, as do most stately homes in the UK, because what happens is the family essentially runs out of money to be able to upkeep such a grandiose structure, or they just don't have their bloodline to continue with. Either the family dies out or they move elsewhere. So they get given over to the National Trust, who take care of them and charge you entry to go and have a look around. While I was there, I went and checked out the water mill as well, which is still running. It's been a mill since at least 1086, and it was mentioned in the Domesday Book. This mill was built in the late 17th century, and it's still in working order today. And I do really mean working order. It's actually a functioning mill that still creates flour from wheat and from other grains, heritage and more modern. I even had a chance to chat to a couple of the guys who are working there who are actually full-time millers, which I think is amazing when old professions are still being done by people today. So these are the two guys who are working there, very lovely guys they were too, and they even stopped to have a chat with me.
Is this your full-time, is it?
This what, sorry?
Your full-time job?
Yes, it is.
That's amazing.
But we use this set of stones here we use for ancient grain, for rye and spelt.
Yeah.
And then the other set that we're going to clean next, that set, the one over on the right there, is going to be, we use those for wheat, because it's quite a modern grain, that one. So
right.
We use it for...
Are they just easier to grind, modern grains, or?
Yeah. We find that with the wheat, it almost falls apart.
Yeah.
Almost like it wants to be milled.
Yeah.
Whereas these put up a bit of a fight.
Right.
Because as you mill, your stones start to warm up through the day. So the warmer they get, it helps release some of the moisture and oil within the flour and the grain.
Yeah.
So with wheat, it's quite dry.
Yeah.
So 30 minutes all day to get 25 kilos. Usually with something like spelt and rye, they're just tougher grains, they've got more moisture and oil in them. So any warmth, they just start releasing, it just slows down. Today is a weird day for spelt because it didn't. It was 35 minutes all day long, which is fantastic.
That's for a 25 kilo sack.
That's for a 25 kilo sack. So, yeah, been very good today, but it doesn't always. It might be that it takes 40 minutes for your first, and then by the end of the day, an hour, hour and a half.
Just slows down.
So it really slows down.
Oh, that's cool.
But we don't mind because we don't sell as much spelt or rye, so if it does go a bit slower, it just means we can mill for a bit longer.
Yeah.
And not make as much because we're not overproducing them. Like how we sort of try to rationalise it a little bit.
Because the good thing about milling like this is that although our stones warm up, they don't get hot. And what that means is that it's not killing the germ within the grain. So
Yeah,
our
yeah.
flour, for about a month after we've milled it, is still essentially alive. So it's still
Right, I
producing the good
see.
stuff into the flour. So if we made 2 tons of it 1 week, it would just be sat in a storeroom for months on end. And it's, you know, it's not, you know, we want the best product to be going out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for talking to me. Have a good day.
Well, that was quite a pleasant experience. I don't think I've ever spoken to 2 professional millers before. Now, the mill also contained within it a whole manner of traditional equipment used in agriculture. Obviously, today we've upgraded and we use a lot more modern tools, but it's nice to see the heirlooms of our historical and agricultural past sat around in properties like this, so we can have a good look at how people used to have to process all of the various products that we needed to make the food that we eat today. It's a good reminder of how lucky we are to live in the time that we do, and just how difficult it would have been to get the basic amenities of life back in the day. Now, the mill actually had its own gift shop selling its own flour, and I thought it would be rude not to buy myself a bag of bread making flour. Now, on the opposite hill to the castle, I spied what looked like an old medieval watchtower, so I went to go and have a look at it. This is called Conygar Tower, and it looks quite old to the eye, but it was actually commissioned by the Luttrell family in 1775 to be built on the hill opposite to where they lived. The name itself blends coney, which is the medieval word for rabbit, and garth, which is the medieval word for garden, and it is believed to have been a warren used to breed rabbits for food. Ancient looking structures like these are called follies. Now, they are built as ornamental structures. They're normally commissioned by a wealthy family or the local government to make a place look cool. They're normally placed in local parks or on nearby hills, just so a place has that little extra historical pizzazz. With Dunster explored, it was time to go to the Hobo Tour.
Freaking sweet!
I met up with Exmoor HEMA and we all drove up in convoy to the grounds of Dunster Castle itself.
Dunster Castle, everyone.
Here we see our esteemed hosts, Diana and David.
There's the men themselves and lady.
And look, it's Tobias of Exmoor HEMA. He invited me. Now, you may remember him if you've been watching the channel for a while, because he's the guy I fought at the Wessex League tournament who I stabbed in the neck past his gorget, and we had a medical stoppage on that particular fight. He's the one who came closest to beating me in this tournament, as he's a very talented fencer. Lucky for me, he had no hard feelings about me trying to kill him and invited me to this event. And look, it's Derek of Exmoor HEMA. Now, you may remember Derek because I actually competed against him for the gold medal in that very same tournament that I fought Tobias. We had a cracking fight, and luckily I took gold and he took silver. And all in all, both of them are top blokes. Having all arrived safe and introductions having been made, we were taken up to where our lesson was taking place, which was on the top of the main bailey, which was the site of the original Mott and Bailey castle from the Norman period. This is the oldest part of Dunster Castle. Once we'd all caught our breath, having climbed a fair few stairs to get up to this part of the castle, the lesson began. Dinah went first, and she was leading a workshop on fueling that culminated in a blindfolded blade work in the bind workshop, which was really cool actually, very, very interesting. Now, I'm not going to show you their actual lessons because that's their work and not mine, and it would be unfair for me to do so. However, I do have some photos here that were provided by Exmoor HEMA to sort of give you an idea of what we got up to. Myself and Tobias were training partners for this one, and it ultimately was a pretty fun task, if a little bit daunting, because you're quite used to being able to see your opponent when you're fighting with a blade. All in all, though, I took away some very interesting new skills. David then followed this up with his own workshop on how to use our HEMA skills in a choreographed fight, which was interesting for me because it reminded me very much of my old reenactment career, where we used to put on stage combat shows for people dressed as Vikings. So I got to use a lot of my old skills in that one, which was awesome. Both workshops were very well received by everyone there, and all in all we had an excellent day. Many new skills were learned and a lot of fun was had. I even adapted her lesson into my own, which is now available on my channel. The link will be in the description below. Now, that's everything from me today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you'd like to see more of my content, please consider liking and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one, and long live the fighters.
That's right.